The courtroom buzzed with the usual undercurrent of expectation. Papers shuffled, quiet murmurs exchanged among spectators, and the faint echo of a gavel striking from a nearby courtroom. Judge Camille Hart sat tall behind the bench, her demeanor calm and unreadable. Another docket, another trial. Just another day in court, or so she assumed. The bailiff stood, voice steady as he announced, State of Louisiana versus Jamal Richardson. Camille shifted, her palms resting on the cool surface of the bench, eyes scanning the docket: assault, theft, resisting arrest. The charges were familiar, all too common. A quiet sigh threatened her lips, yet another soul ensnared by the cycle she fought so hard to disrupt. Then the defendant was led in. The world tilted. The man in chains, his step slow and heavy, wasn't he just another name on a sheet? He was Jamal. Her Jamal. Her breath caught. Memories hit her like a crashing wave: barefoot bike rides down sun-cracked roads, hushed conversations beneath the twisted arms of the old cypress tree behind her mother's house, whispered promises to never lose each other. But this man, this worn-down version with shackles at his feet, was not the boy she once knew. His shoulders were stooped, his face hardened by time and pain. But the eyes. Those dark, searching eyes were still his. Camille's fingers clenched around the base of her gavel. Her voice, usually confident and precise, faltered. "Mr. Richardson," she began, trying to keep her voice neutral, "you are charged with assault and robbery. How do you plead?" His voice rasped deeper, rougher, but unmistakably familiar. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The courtroom seemed to dissolve around her. How had they arrived here on opposite sides of justice? The prosecutor launched into their opening remarks, but Camille heard little. Her thoughts drifted back to the small, divided town of Bell Parish where they'd grown up. Her family lived in a modest colonial on Magnolia Street. Jamal's family resided near the edge of town, past the railroad tracks and overgrown fields, in a weathered house with a sagging porch. Their worlds weren't far in miles, but they were galaxies apart in status, color, and expectations. She remembered the day they met by sheer accident. She wandered off behind her backyard and stumbled upon a quiet creek where Jamal was fishing alone, his line hopelessly tangled in vines. She helped. He thanked her with a shy smile. That moment turned into a friendship no one understood and no one approved of. She could still hear his voice from one of those nights under the stars: "You ever dream of just leaving all this, going someplace where we don't get stared at just for being in the same place?" She had laughed at the time, brushing it off. But Jamal had meant it. Even as kids, he saw the invisible walls that hemmed them in. Their friendship weathered many storms: gossip, disapproval, even warnings. But eventually, the pressure from both sides grew too heavy. One summer afternoon changed everything. She was sitting on her front porch beside him, sharing a soda and a story, when her father pulled into the driveway. His eyes narrowed. His tone was cold. "Camille. Inside. Now." Jamal stood, still as stone. "It's okay," he said gently. "Go ahead." And that was it. She went inside. The next day, his family was gone. She buried herself in books, chased excellence like it was her only lifeline, earned her law degree, and took the bench with a commitment to fairness. But she never truly forgot the boy who once made her believe in a better world. Now he stood before her accused, broken, a stranger in chains. And Camille had to make an impossible choice: bury the past, or let it cloud the justice she was sworn to uphold. This is what courage looked like now, Camille thought, poised on the bench, faced with a decision that reached far deeper than the charges on the docket. She couldn't stop wondering what paths Jamal had walked after she turned away that day so many years ago. According to his file, his record wasn't spotless: petty infractions, a few misdemeanors, mostly small things. Nothing violent. Nothing that screamed danger. But a rap sheet was just ink on paper. It didn't speak of context, of pain, of choices made in survival. A sharp voice pulled her from her thoughts. The accused assaulted a store clerk without provocation before fleeing with cash from the register, the prosecutor stated, his words cutting through the quiet hum of the courtroom. Camille's eyes shifted to Jamal. He sat still, his hands folded loosely on the table, posture low and closed off. But his face gave little away. Had he really done this, or was there more beneath the surface than the prosecution wanted the jury to see? When court broke for lunch, Camille retreated to her chambers, her mind a whirlwind of questions. The door opened quietly behind her. Her assistant, Margaret, peeked in with concern written across her face. "Judge Hart, everything okay? You seemed distracted." Camille paused, caught between the urge to confide and the weight of her oath. Would it be a breach of conduct to admit she knew the man on trial? Her lips thinned. "I'm all right, Margaret. Just thinking through the details." But she wasn't all right. Not even close. How could she be, when the boy she once knew who sat beside her under stars and spoken of dreams was now just a defendant waiting for judgment? By the time the court reconvened, the gallery had filled. Reporters scribbled into notebooks. Observers murmured in hushed tones. The prosecutor, Richard Faulkner, stood ready to make his case. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, voice precise and confident, "this trial is about an act of senseless aggression. About a man who stormed into a convenience store, assaulted an employee, and made off with stolen cash. The evidence will be clear: the defendant, Jamal Richardson, committed this crime." Camille felt her stomach coil. His words were efficient, impersonal, delivered as though Jamal were just a name, one of many he might prosecute this month. She glanced at Jamal. He didn't lift his head. Then it was the defense attorney's turn. Lisa Navarro, young but composed, rose to speak. Her tone rang with poise. "The prosecution wants you to see a simple story. But this case isn't simple. My client has proclaimed his innocence from the start. And we intend to prove that what's been assumed, what was presumed at the time of arrest, doesn't stand up to scrutiny." The first witness took the stand, a store employee on duty the night of the robbery. He spoke with practiced confidence, detailing how someone matching Jamal's build entered the store, argued with the cashier, and then leapt over the counter. But something in his voice didn't sit right with Camille. Too rehearsed. Too smooth. Lisa stood for the cross-examination. Her tone was sharp but measured. "You mentioned the individual was wearing a red hoodie, correct?" The man nodded. "Yes." "And did you see his face clearly?" "Not really. It was dim, and he had the hood pulled up." Lisa nodded slowly, walking a short arc across the courtroom. "So what you're saying is, you can't definitively confirm that the person you saw was Mr. Richardson?" "Well, no." "No further questions," she said briskly, cutting him off. Camille watched Jamal shift slightly in his seat, his back a bit straighter, his chin a touch higher. The flicker of hope, faint as it was, had returned to his posture. Next came the grainy surveillance footage from the store. The quality was poor, shadows blurred into one another. A figure in a red hoodie entered, moved quickly toward the counter, and then vanished from view. The video cut off abruptly. The prosecution insisted the figure was Jamal. But Camille studied the footage with narrowed eyes. No clear face. No defining features. Just movement and shadow and silence. Jamal's defense rested on his alibi. He claimed he had been walking home from a friend's house at the time of the robbery. But the friend, unnamed in open court, refused to testify, afraid of getting involved due to local tensions. Lisa addressed it head-on. "The absence of a willing witness does not equate to guilt," she told the jury. "Fear doesn't disprove innocence." Still, Camille knew what the jury might see: a man with a record. No alibi. A grainy video and a hoodie. And yet, it still didn't feel right. As testimony continued and the courtroom buzzed with evidence and rebuttal, Camille found herself struggling with the same question she had tried to avoid since Jamal entered that courtroom: how do you weigh justice when it collides with memory? The expressions on the jurors' faces revealed a growing uncertainty as the trial continued. Judge Elena Monroe could feel the strain of her duty bearing down with each passing hour. She was supposed to remain impartial, the embodiment of fairness, but how could she, when the man sitting at the defense table was tied to a childhood she had tried so hard to bury? The boy who once knew her better than anyone else was now on trial, shackled and fighting for his freedom. And she was the one presiding over it all. When court adjourned for the day, Elena remained seated behind the bench long after the room had emptied, her fingertips brushing along the smooth edge of the gavel. She ached to speak to James, to ask him what had happened in the years since they'd last seen each other. But she knew the rules. Any private interaction with him now would compromise the entire case and potentially end her career. She watched silently as he was led away in cuffs, and for the first time in years, her confidence in the justice system wavered. She had always believed in its ability to uncover truth, but now she wasn't so sure. Maybe the truth wasn't something the courtroom could always reach. The trial resumed with a quiet intensity in the air. It was the defense's turn to present their side, and attorney Lisa Porter called her first key witness, Officer Daniel Harris, the arresting officer. Elena leaned in slightly from the bench, her attention sharpening. If there were any holes in the prosecution's case, this was where they might surface. Officer Harris, a broad-shouldered man with a stern presence, took the stand. Lisa approached him calmly. Officer Harris, she began evenly, you were the officer who detained Mr. Anderson, is that correct? Correct, he responded curtly. You noted in your report that my client was found walking approximately 2 blocks from the site of the alleged robbery. Is that accurate? Yes. Lisa nodded, then pressed, what made you believe he was the suspect? He matched the general description, Harris said. African American male, mid-40s, wearing dark clothes? Lisa raised her eyebrows. Dark clothes? Yet, the individual seen in the surveillance footage was reportedly wearing a red hoodie. Did you find such an item on Mr. Anderson at the time of arrest? Harris hesitated. No, but he could be tossed it. Lisa stepped a little closer. Could have. Did you or any other officer search the nearby area for this red hoodie? No, Harris admitted after a pause. We didn't have time. He was apprehended quickly. So, Lisa said, her tone now sharper, you arrested him based solely on a vague description and didn't recover any physical evidence linking him to the crime scene. The silence that followed said more than Harris could. Elena glanced toward the jury, a few members exchanged wary looks. Lisa wasn't finished. Do you recall if Mr. Anderson said anything at the time of arrest? He said he was innocent. And did you investigate that claim, or simply assume guilt because he fit the description? Harris shifted, his face tightening. I followed standard procedure, protocol, Lisa repeated, voice tinged with disbelief. Understood. No further questions, Your Honor. The room buzzed with murmurs as Harris stepped down, his authority visibly weakened. Elena's pulse quickened. This case wasn't just about James anymore, it was shining a light on a deeper issue. A system that often rushed to judgment, too ready to label a man without due diligence. Lisa's next move caught everyone off guard. She called a forensic video expert to the stand, a specialist who had studied the convenience store surveillance footage. The analyst explained that, based on the figure's height and proportions, there was no conclusive way to verify it was James. More concerning, however, was that the video's timestamp had been altered, undermining its reliability as evidence. The prosecution dismissed the testimony as speculation, but Elena noticed the ripple it caused across the jury. Doubt had crept into the proceedings, and it wasn't going away quietly. As the day drew to a close, Lisa gave James the opportunity to testify. She had warned him of the risks, but he had insisted. He walked slowly to the stand, the soft clink of chains echoing with every step. He sat, took a breath, and faced the jury. His voice was low, but carried the weight of a lifetime. "I've made bad choices," he began. "Hung around the wrong people. Took the wrong turns. But this robbery, I didn't do it." He paused, his eyes sweeping across the faces in front of him. "I was walking home that night, not causing trouble. The officers didn't ask questions. They didn't care. I just looked like someone they were told to find." His voice cracked, but he pushed through. "I've been fighting my whole life to be seen, to be heard, to not be written off before anyone knows who I am. But now I'm tired. Tired of being judged before I ever get a chance to speak." A heavy silence followed. Not even the shuffle of papers or the scratch of pens. Just the raw echo of a man laying his truth bare. "I just want the truth to matter." James's words lingered in the air, raw and unvarnished. As he returned to his seat, Judge Eleanor Monroe felt a tightness in her throat. It wasn't just a statement, it was a quiet plea for dignity, for humanity. She glanced at the jury. Their expressions were a swirl of contemplation, uncertainty, empathy, hesitation. They weren't just weighing facts anymore, they were grappling with the deeper question of justice in a flawed world. Elena understood her role. She was not merely an enforcer of rules. Her duty was to interpret the law in service of justice, not just in form, but in spirit. And today, that line felt thinner than ever. The final day of the trial dawned with a heavy air of expectation. The courtroom was packed, tension simmering in every corner. Both sides made their closing arguments with determination. The prosecutor stuck to the process, emphasizing the chain of events and pointing to what little circumstantial evidence they had. "Trust the system," he urged the jury. "It works." But Lisa Porter took a different route. She urged the jurors to look deeper, to question the gaps in the evidence, to see the humanity in the man before them, to consider the cost of a wrongful conviction. She didn't ask for sympathy, she asked for fairness, clarity, and courage. Elena listened without showing emotion, but inside, her thoughts were racing. Her influence ended where the jury's deliberation began. But if their verdict left room for ambiguity, it would be her responsibility to interpret what came next. The weight of that potential moment settled over her like a storm cloud. Hours passed. The courtroom emptied and refilled, murmurs growing and fading as people stretched their legs or exchanged quiet speculations. James sat still through it all, hands clenched together on the table, silent. He hadn't met Elena's gaze once since the trial began, and she couldn't fault him for it. What could she possibly say now that would undo the silence of so many years? Finally, the bailiff returned. "The jury has reached a verdict." A hush swept the room. The foreperson stood, her hand trembling slightly as she read from the verdict form. "In the matter of the state of Louisiana versus James Anderson, we find the defendant." A pause stretched impossibly long. "Not guilty." Gasps and murmurs spread through the gallery, followed by a few scattered cheers. Elena raised her gavel and brought it down gently but firmly. "Order, please." At the defense table, James exhaled deeply, his shoulders slumping as if an invisible weight had fallen away. But his face remained unreadable. He was free but not unchanged. Not untouched. Elena cleared her throat. "The jury has delivered its verdict. Mr. Anderson, you are released from custody. Court is adjourned." As the room gradually emptied, Elena remained at the bench, watching as James moved through the final steps of his release. He signed the necessary documents quietly, a court clerk explaining each one in a low voice. She assumed he would leave without a word. But just before exiting, he turned. The courtroom was nearly empty now, only a few staff lingering and gathering their things. He approached the bench slowly, his face guarded. "You don't owe me anything," he said, voice low. "But I need to ask, why didn't you say anything you knew me?" Elena felt a lump rise in her throat. "Because I couldn't. she said softly. I had to remain neutral. If I'd spoken up, if I had shown anything, it could be compromised the trial. And the verdict? James studied her face, pain flickering behind his eyes. Neutral, he repeated. That's the word, isn't it, but the world's never been neutral. Not for people like me. She looked down, her hand brushing the edge of the bench. You're right. I wish I had done more when we were kids. I wish I could be done more now. He took a slow breath, his posture softening. We were young, we didn't understand what we were up against. But you see it now, don't you? I do, she said, her voice steady despite the heaviness in her chest. And I'm sorry. James gave a quiet nod, not of forgiveness but of acknowledgement. Then he turned and walked away, shoulders squared, head high, as he passed through the courtroom doors and into the evening light. Elena remained seated in the empty courtroom, the echo of his footsteps fading behind her. She had upheld the law, but the trial had revealed something deeper. Justice wasn't confined to verdicts or legal arguments. It was about people. About the invisible burdens they carried. About the assumptions they fought to escape. This case had changed her. As she stepped outside into the waning daylight, shadows stretching across the courthouse steps, Elena made a silent promise to herself. She couldn't rewrite the past. But she could use her position to shape a future that delivered more than hollow assurances. A future that truly saw the people behind the names. That held itself accountable not only to the law but to truth. It wouldn't be easy. It might not even be possible. But for James and for herself she had to try.